This is the voice of the Republic. Facts don't care about your feelings. Reality doesn't need your approval. No spin, no excuses, no lies. We break it down. We call it out. We say it straight. If it's true, you'll hear it here. If it's weak, we tear it apart. This is clarity. This is backbone. This is the voice of the Republic. And it starts now.
Is capitalism evil? Yes, no, maybe. There's no need for maybe and there's no need for yes. The answer is no. It is an objective answer that I'm going to give. Every single thing I talk about in this episode is going to be completely objective. Certain things we cannot deny. The same way I cannot deny objective truth. Objective truth being, let's say hypothetically, for the sake of the argument, we're talking about a wall. And I heard this from a really smart person. See, democracy is not correct. That's why America is a republic. Let's say hypothetically, for the sake of the argument, there's a wall, and that wall is objectively white. The wall is white color. The wall is this color, white. So let's say the wall is white, but somebody argues that the wall is green. And let's say we have 20 people in the room, and they vote, is the wall white? 5% of them say the wall is white, and the rest say the wall is green or purple or X. The wall is not X. The wall is not purple. The wall is not green. The wall is going to always be objectively white. These are some just things to kind of explain what objective truth is, because a lot of people don't acknowledge it and a lot of people just ignore it. Why I don't ignore objective truth is because it's objective. Certain things are objective. Now we can say that certain things are objective when they're factually not objective. Like saying that if we have a wall and it is half white, half black, we cannot say objectively, yeah, it is this percentage white and it is this percentage black, unless we fact check. If we fact check and that ends up being true, then that is objectively correct. But unless we know the absolute, complete, and other answer for something, we cannot say that that thing is objective. You cannot look at a mug, and let's say I have a mug. Matter of fact, I'm going to get a mug. This is one of many mugs that I have. I have American mugs, Swiss mugs, Canadian mug, a really small Canadian mug from Montreal. Yeah, it's from Montreal. I just don't see it currently. But let's say hypothetically, somebody grabs a mug. And let's say he puts a mug like this. And you're watching from this POV that you're seeing this mug from is the same POV that you would be watching that mug if he was showing it to you. Let's say person A is saying, this mug is filled with liquid. And you say, well, I cannot say that objectively it is because I have no facts. I didn't see it visually. I do not know that it is filled with water. Matter of fact, if he does this with the mug and the mug makes noise of water in it, we can still not say that it's filled with water because it can be some other liquid. It can be coffee, it can be energy drink, it can be a Coke, it can be anything. Maybe there's nothing in it. He was playing the sound on the speaker. That's why objective truth is undeniable. Objective truth is the truth that we know is the truth. Objective truth is the sky is blue. And the objective truth is sun is probably really hot. Now, why do we say that these things are objective truth? The same way you cannot say what's inside of a mug without looking and checking. You can maybe look and see water. And he says, look, it's water. And you say, yes, objectively in that mug, that's water. And then you drink it and it ends up being poison and you die. So it wasn't water. So that's the objective truth. Why am I talking about objective truth? In this episode, which is the episode 4 of The Voice of the Republic, we're going to be talking, is capitalism evil? Capitalism is not evil. Objectively, it's not. Capitalism is the only system we can give to the government and to the people where we have a limited government and that government has a small amount of power. Now, what type of a power can it have? Well, we can look at it just geographically, we can look at countries. Some countries are different, some countries are quite similar. You can look at the Nordic countries and say they're quite similar. They have certain differences, but they're quite similar when it comes to their politics. They're mostly left wing, and they have certain ideologies that I might not value and I might be against. Does that mean that those things are bad? Not necessarily, but if I have the evidence, facts, and statistics to back it up and say that that is evil because it doesn't work, then I am factually right. And that is the objective truth if I have evidence for it. Now, certain things you don't need evidence for. Certain things you need evidence for, but it needs to be a really small amount of evidence. Like saying that the wall is wide. We can look at a wall and say that it's wide because it's wide. And that's a simple thing. It's more of a simple thing. Not everything is as simple, and not everything is just a wall being wide. When we talk about a economic system, we can confidently say that capitalism is the best system we have and we ever had. Why is that? Why does capitalism work and socialism, communism doesn't work? And why is democratic socialism bogus? Because it never existed. Democratic socialism is capitalism with just a bunch of socialized benefits, which are not benefits because they drain you and they drain your children and they drain the whole existence of you and the people that you know. How do they drag you? We can get into that. But before that, we're just going to acknowledge why capitalism is the best system. Capitalism is a system where we have a small, limited government. In certain countries in Europe, the government is much larger. Like, let's say, hypothetically, we can grab Germany, we can grab Austria, we can grab even more shitty countries to say, like Serbia. We can take those countries and we can say, well, in these countries, you pay a high amount of taxes. In this country, you pay more than in the other. But still, you pay a good amount of taxes. Why is that? That is because they love socialized benefits, which are evil and a robbery, and are basically one of the most disgusting things I ever saw. But that's my opinion. That's my opinion, which I can give the objective truth. I can explain it why that is objectively true by giving you facts, stats, and evidence. But we're going to talk about it. So we have these countries, and they're European countries. And in these European countries, you pay a higher amount of taxes than hypothetically, not hypothetically, factually in the US. So in the US, you would be paying a smaller amount of taxes than in European countries. We all know this. That's why European businesses move to America to open their business. Why is that? Simple. Because America is business friendly. America goes in and lets you do your business thing and lets you write off some of the taxes if you genuinely benefit the society. That is capitalism. A small limited government with a free flow of money. Money flows through the system. Socialism and communism, not so much. I am not going to repeat the same old argument. I am not going to say the same old thing you heard if you from your favorite political commentator what socialism is. How I am not going to say that. I am going to describe it in a more humane way, just using logic without repeating the same old talking points that every single right wing or even left wing commentator says. Even though left wing commentators are more prone to fake news and kind of being one sided because they obviously favor that system. Because their dream is democratic socialism, which is simply just capitalism, with a bunch of socialized benefits that are dragging the capitalist part through the mud and kind of weakening the capitalism. By weakening, I mean when you are forced to pay a high amount of taxes, the more successful you are, you're obviously going to go to a country where you pay a less amount of taxes, where it's more business friendly. Of course, I'm talking about the United States. Now, we can grab these European countries. We're just going to say Switzerland, Austria, and Germany. What similarities do those countries have? Well, they're in Europe, not in the European, not all of them, but these countries are European countries. Switzerland is a European country, and Austria is a European country, and Germany is a European country. Now, what's the big difference between these countries? The difference is large. The difference is really big. The big difference is that Switzerland is much more business friendly. And I'm not saying this because I lived in Switzerland and I live in Switzerland or because I have family there. I am saying this simply because it's a better country. In Switzerland, you pay lower amount of taxes. Stuff that you would usually be forced to pay to the government is you pay to the private companies, which is phenomenal. Why? Because money does what a circle. Money circles around. It goes to them. Then they let me actually give you a phenomenal way to describe this. When we have a socialized hospital and just socialized healthcare, that means that you have healthcare for which you would be paying until the day you die and until your children die. That is the objective truth. Why and how? Europeans love to say to Americans and some other countries, but mostly Americans, we have free healthcare. That is objectively not true. That is one of the biggest lies you can hear from someone. Europe does not have free healthcare. Matter of fact, Europe has the most expensive healthcare. How can I say that? And what's the explanation? The explanation is quite simple. European healthcare is socialized healthcare. Socialized healthcare is a socialized benefit. By benefit, I mean you're forced to pay that. If you don't pay that, you go to jail. So you need to pay this money. Every time a European goes to his job, comes home, and at the end of the month, he gets his paycheck, a good amount of that money goes to socialized benefits, to free college, to free high school, to free healthcare. And when he pays those taxes, he says, well, at least it's free and I'm not American. Because in America, you would have that money left up to you. And if you had to go to a hospital, you would go and pay or you would get insurance owned by private companies. And Switzerland does this really well. Swiss type healthcare and hospitals are phenomenal because it's left up to the private companies. And private companies are phenomenal. Why are private companies phenomenal? We're going to get into this real simply and really. It's such an easy thing to explain, unless you're a low IQ European, which I am not. Now, how do we explain this in the most simple way we can? It's quite simple. We have a European country like Germany. In Germany, you pay the taxes. And when you pay the taxes, we're going to take a good chunk of that and go and just throw it at the healthcare industry. The healthcare industry is financed. Is that good? Many people will say, yes, that's pretty nice. We have healthcare that is not free because we just learned that healthcare in Europe is not free. Why? Because you pay for it until the day you die, if you work, of course. Now, if you don't work, you get it for free. Why? Because me and you finance it for them. If you work and if I work, we finance we finance the services that the hospital is going to give to a homeless guy. We finance homeless people. We finance everyone. Now, why is that? Because not everybody needs to work. Certain people that don't want to work don't have to work. And I would say that if you don't want to work, you don't have to work. You have the freedom to do whatever you want. But when you go to the hospital, it should not be my job to finance your healthcare bill. It just shouldn't, and it never was. And for people that say, well, it is a nice thing to do, a nice thing to do is not always the best thing to do. The nicest thing for you would probably be to give out all of your money to a homeless guy. Now, would you do that if you have a fully developed brain? No, obviously you wouldn't. Why? Because a homeless guy is mostly going to end up under a bridge doing crack cocaine and methamphetamine. Now, do we want to encourage that type of a behavior? Well, no. Well, if you give your money every single day to a homeless guy and he does crack, is he going to stop doing crack or is he going to continue doing crack? Well, the obvious answer is the homeless guy is going to continue doing crack because it makes more sense to do crack. If he does crack, he relieves the stress. There's no stress for him, which makes his life much easier. Now, besides his life being easier, he also has free crack because you finance it for him. Now, obviously, if we put the same thing when it comes to healthcare, we can just switch the whole thing. If a homeless guy doesn't work and you finance his healthcare, that homeless guy, if he has any single, if his brain is even working a little bit, he's going to realize, wait, I have socialized this for food and I have socialized that for a place to stay. And also, I get socialized healthcare. Well, why would I even work? I would say the same thing. Me and you finance that homeless guy's healthcare bill. Why? Because if he doesn't work, he doesn't provide to the government. If he doesn't provide to the government, The government doesn't need to force him to pay a single dime. And if he doesn't pay a single dime, that means that that dime needs to come from someone, which means what? That means that your healthcare, that your taxes when it comes to healthcare and hospitals is going to increase. If your taxes increase, it doesn't increase out of nowhere. It doesn't increase because the government wants to reinvest the money and bring new technology when it comes to the healthcare space. No, it increases because homeless people are abusing the healthcare system. Now, Europeans have a huge problem when it comes to this because in European countries, illegal immigration and weak legal immigration is a huge problem. Why is that? Because the European government is importing people from the third world into their countries, which are Western countries. At least they were a couple of years ago. Now, I wouldn't be able to say that for the big 2026 because the things have really went south, especially knowing family members that went to France. um, those that is not the same France that we know from the 2000s, and even in the 2000s it wasn't perfect. So that means that if we import Europe with a bunch of illegal immigrants and legal immigrants through weak immigration system, that means that they're not going to be working because the statistics show that they're not working. And even if they are working, still, if we import 100 people, let's say that just one person out of those 100 people is not working. If we import them, no matter what, if 99% of them work and that single 1% doesn't, that still increases your taxes by that 1% because that money and that equipment in the hospital that he used needs to be financed. And it's financed how? It's financed by your tax dollars, by your tax euros, by your tax whatever pounds. That's a huge problem. And if we don't acknowledge the problem of socialized benefits, which are not benefits, they are a robbery, because people say, well, it's not a robbery, it's a benefit that you can go to a hospital and not pay. Well, I would say that it's not actually a benefit. I would much rather go to a hospital and pay out of my pocket than end up financing the healthcare for the whole country and for the people that don't want to work and for these people that just immigrated or these people that just illegally immigrated. I don't want to finance their hospital bills. And matter of fact, I just don't want a hospital. I don't want to finance it. Also, another thing is hospitals being available everywhere. It's not about Europe having more hospitals than America. That is simply not true. The big problem is that Europe has a waiting time problem. And because of that, I have dead relatives. So is a lot of Europeans, matter of fact, ignore the fact, but it is true. A lot of Europeans are going to grow up and a couple of people from their families to their closer families are going to die because they simply had to wait 12 months for a simple operation or a simple checkout. And that is a huge problem. If we don't acknowledge that, we cannot move on as a European society, which I don't call, I simply am not going to call myself a part of the European society because I simply don't want to be on a losing team. Now, European countries need to wake up. Why? You import immigrant comes. Immigrant doesn't work. Immigrant doesn't finance his stuff. Immigrant gets free stuff. Free stuff is not free. Free stuff comes from your taxes. Your taxes go up. Then you go to hospital and then you see immigrant taking up your spot. When the immigrant takes up your spot, not such a big problem. You wait a couple of minutes. When there is hundreds of thousands, millions of immigrants, it's not going to be him taking up your spot for 2 hours. It's going to be for a couple of months. And I experienced that myself. Obviously, when you need to go to a hospital and you pay these taxes because you work, then you're like, well, at least I'm going to use these benefits, even though they're not benefits, so I can go to a hospital and get a checkup. So I can get rid of this on my finger, or I can get rid of that, or I can just go for a checkup. I broke my finger or something. So I'm just going to go to a hospital and get rid of that or fix that. Well, when you go to a hospital, you need to know that you're going to get horrible care, which we're going to get into. Why? It's not about horrible care. The bigger problem is that you're probably not going to get care for a couple of months. And that's a huge problem. Obviously, if you have a serious disease or if you seriously got hurt, if you broke a bone or you have some really bad injury, it's going to be a really, really big problem for you that you're going to wait for a couple of months. And some people even years. And I know that sounds insane for a lot of people that don't have a problem with that. But you need to wait a couple of months or even a year or more than a year to just get the simple surgery or a single checkup. That really shows the problem of socialized healthcare not working. Is American healthcare phenomenal? No. Is it better than European healthcare? Absolutely. Everybody that says it's not, I do not care what they say. They're not looking at things objectively, and they're not looking at things when it comes to statistics or facts. Now, what's even a bigger problem in just European healthcare? Swiss not included, because Switzerland does healthcare really nicely. Switzerland is really similar to America. Switzerland, when it comes to a lot of their laws, is quite similar to America. When it comes to gun laws, Switzerland is probably the closest to America. When it comes to free market capitalism, Switzerland is the closest country to America we have. There's not a single country similar to America but Switzerland. Sure, visually it might not be the New York or Alabama, but again, when it comes to law wise, laws are a great representation of American laws, and that's why I have an unbelievable amount of respect for Switzerland. Obviously, as a kid that lived there since he was a little kid, and then he moved from here to here. But I was in Switzerland since a little kid, and I was happy flying to like when I was in the air on a plane. I was unbelievably happy and grateful that I can go to such a great country. I didn't acknowledge it as a great country then, but now when I realize how the rest of European countries operate, I can comfortably say that when it comes to European countries, Switzerland is the only country. Why? Because it doesn't care about the EU degeneracy, because they don't care about the regulations. They get rid of regulations, and they also let you own a gun. They'll let you defend yourself. Now, sure, there's a lot of things that I would improve, like being able to carry a gun and being able to carry firearms, shotguns, and semi-automatic guns, including automatic guns, if you ask me. But still, a step in a right direction compared to other European countries. A big problem with the healthcare, to just get back on the topic, is this: a humongous problem and a really, really big problem that no European is going to acknowledge. In America, in Switzerland, healthcare has this thing which I would call, there's different ways to describe it, but I would describe it the best way using this terminology: a circle, a money circle. So a money circle is this: you go to a hospital or you have insurance, but let's get it really, really simple. You go to a hospital, your arm is broken, the surgery is going to cost $3,000 or 3,000 francs or 3,000 euros. So it is going to cost $3,000 of your money. You're going to pay that money. When you pay that money is going to go into just normal basic stuff that the hospital needs to take care of. It is going to go for the electricity bill. It is going to go for the equipment that you used up. It is going to go for the labor of that doctor and labor of that nurse, because all of that needs to be financed. And when you finance that, there's going to be an excess amount of money which is going to go to the hospital. Now, that money doesn't go to evil capitalists. Matter of fact, no money goes to evil capitalists. The capitalist that owns that hospital, hypothetically, is going to pay for staff, for electricity, for power, for the equipment you used up. And the rest of the money is going to do this phenomenal thing, which I'm a huge fan of, and this is why I love capitalism and love innovation. It is going to do a money circle. What is a money circle? Then the rest of the money is going to be reinvested into the company. So the rest of the money is going to be reinvested into the hospital, getting better windows, getting better doors, getting better staff, getting better technology. And that better technology is going to bring more innovation. More innovation is going to bring more satisfaction. More satisfaction is going to bring better paying surgeries. Better paying surgeries are going to bring more money, and the innovation circle is going to continue doing a loop all over and over and over and over and over again. This is phenomenal. This is the key of the system: to go in, pay, finance, get rid of the problem, and then with the excess money to reinvest that money into that same company to bring more innovation. That's why Switzerland is so successful when it comes to their hospitals. That's why when a lot of people in Europe have a serious disease, they go to Switzerland to get rid of it, because Switzerland is really successful when it comes to these things. This is why I have as I shown, a Swiss mug, and I have another one there, and I have a shirt from Switzerland. Huge fan of the country. And the same thing happens in America. So a lot of people are complaining about capitalism and about healthcare. Capitalism and healthcare are not your problem. The real problem is you. Why are you the problem? It is really simple. Let's say, hypothetically, for the sake of the argument, you go to a hospital. And let's say, hypothetically, for the sake of the argument, you don't have the money to pay for the bill. You can, of course, pay it off. But that becomes a problem. When you don't have the money to pay off that bill, that becomes a serious problem. What was the problem? Well, it wasn't a problem that it was expensive. Matter of fact, that is never the problem. Sure, some procedures cost more. Why? Because they're rare, because they cost more for the staff, and because they cost more when it comes to equipment and technology. That's why certain procedures are expensive. Now, when it comes to things that are expensive and you cannot pay for, whose problem is that? Is it an evil capitalist? Is it a lack of socialized benefits? Or is it you? The obvious answer, in not 99% of scenarios, but 101% of scenarios, is you. It is always your problem. And why is that? When you cannot provide for yourself and for your family, you're considered this thing and this thing only. You're considered a failure. What is a failure? Failure can come in many shapes and sizes. A failure is someone hypothetically not being able to provide for his family or for himself. That is a failure. If you go to a hospital and you're rich because you provide a service to someone else. How do you provide a service? Well, if you're rich, you started a really big company, a news network, and that news network brings news to the whole city, maybe to a couple of your fans. That news networks brings more money. That more of that money brings more joy to you. And besides joy, guess what it also brings? You reinvest the money and you do my money circle. You pay for yourself. You pay for the equipment, for the electricity, for all the bills, and then you reinvest the money into your business so your business can create more money and it can bring more innovation. And then you become rich. And when you're rich and you go to a hospital, you go in and you pay and you leave. You're satisfied, your needs are no longer there, and everything is perfect. Now, a big problem is a lot of people don't want to acknowledge that they're failures, and a lot of people simply just are going to blame the evil capitalist for everything because it's never their fault. That is not true. It is always your fault, especially if you live in the Western world where you can provide and create something for yourself. If you can create something for yourself where you can bring joy, where you can bring a service to someone else, if you bring a service to someone else, that someone else is going to pay for your service. When they pay for your service, you're going to have more money. When you have more money, you're going to pay for the bills, for the electricity bill, for this bill, that bill, and then the rest you're going to reinvest, if you're smart, into the innovation segment. And innovation segment is the most important one of them all. Because if you invest more into innovation, and even if you put your own money into innovation of that company or of that service that you're providing, that company, that business, that show, that news channel, that company, that little store you have is going to bring you more money, which is going to bring you more capital. And that is why capitalism has always worked. That is why no country that is a true capitalist country fails. Because if we look at Switzerland, if we look at America, if we look at true capitalist countries, we can totally acknowledge that those countries are always winning. And even in their dark times, they're still more successful than communist countries, and they're still more successful than socially democratic countries, because they don't truly exist. As we already said at the start of the episode, socially democratic countries are not social democratic countries. They're simply countries that have capitalism, and they drag the capitalism through mud by using a lot of socialized benefits, and then capitalism starts kind of failing, and it fails because we use capitalism to pay off for socialism, which should be left up to a person. If you want to go to a college, you should pay for your own college. If you want to go to a hospital, you should pay for the service that that hospital provides for you. It is really simple. It has worked since day one, and even today it still works. And compared to other countries, it works really well. This is why if you cannot pay for something, it is not the if you cannot buy a banana, it is not the banana's fault. It is all your fault. We should acknowledge that we are sometimes in the wrong. When we acknowledge that, we should say, because of this or that, because of X or Y, I am wrong. And X or Y always and always have to be facts and statistics. Unless something is objectively just true, we cannot trust it. We can only trust things that show statistics and facts. When the statistics and facts show that something is objectively true or objectively wrong, then we can trust that thing. And we need to acknowledge that we're a lot of times wrong. I am not wrong, and I hope you're not wrong. And if you're not wrong, you're going to agree with me and you're going to acknowledge what I said, because everything I said is truth. And if you're saying that it's not truth, well, then you should just look at European countries and you should ask yourself, how is it that these countries used to be the most powerful countries on earth, and now a country that is 250 years old is better than every single European country at everything they do? That is not a coincidence. That is innovation, that is libertarian ideology, and that is capitalism for you. Thank you for watching the fourth episode of The Voice of the Republic.